All right, here we are, boys. We're live, and
Hello.
got it going here. Got it going. How's everyone doing? First of all, we'll go middle. We got Josh Kirkpatrick. Josh, welcome to the Thursday lives.
Thank you. It's exciting to be on.
Yeah, it's a pretty big thing. I mean, it's pretty lucky guy to be here right now.
Well, I get jealous when I see everybody else get on, but me.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's what $20 will get you, bud. That's what got you on that $20. Great. Thanks for then we got obviously Mitch Stewart with us as well. So anybody who's joining in, I'll kind of add to the comments here. We've already got a couple questions that have come in, which is awesome. So
exciting.
Appreciate that. Yeah. And we'll get to those in a minute. But if anyone else has any questions they want to ask on anything, off-season training, hockey, skating, puck control, whatever, working out, different types of exercises. Obviously Mitch and Josh both kind of our strength coaches with Total Package Speed, Strength and Conditioning, and work with NHL athletes all the way down to younger athletes, so they've got a good knowledge on all that. Mitch has been in the field for years, obviously working with myself closely, but also even before that. So he's been. I mean, Mitch, how long have you been in the?
It's actually been 14 years, which is pretty crazy. Like I started my first personal training at the time job at 18, so 14 years.
Oh, and you don't look a day over 22. That's crazy, buddy. That's crazy.
Thanks, appreciate that.
And then Josh, obviously, and Mitch also was an athlete too. But Josh, went to Cornell on a scholarship for track and field, and then somebody saw that he had big legs and a big butt and that he could run, so they asked him to try out for the bobsled team, and he actually went to the Olympics as a bobsledder, which is awesome. But Josh, welcome to the program. Josh, how long have you been into? I know obviously strength and conditioning was a massive part of your entire life as an athlete, but how long have you been kind of actively coaching and training athletes?
I've always had an interest in this, and so even when we were on the bobsled team, guys have their own specialties, and speed was one of mine. So we would kind of coach each other, especially when we're on the road. So I've been really interested in this for a while, but actually coaching with TPH for I think just over 3, maybe 4 years now.
Right? It's already been it's crazy.
Yeah, like almost 4 years.
4 years. Yeah.
It's
pretty wild to think that it's.
I can't believe it.
That.
Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, that's good. Very good. So what we'll do to start off, I put a couple topics up, obviously, just to kind of like that we were going to talk about. And since we have Josh on here, and we Mitch and I talked about this actually, almost every episode has come up with parents asking like, how do I get my player faster? How do I work on speed? How do I work on first 3 steps? Which are always obviously high priority things for any player, being quicker off the start and coming out of turns, being more explosive and stuff like that. But the first question I want to ask is to you, Josh, but you've worked with a couple of our athletes, and I think of guys like Murph and Matt Murphy, who's playing Division III college hockey, who's done a phenomenal job with his training, obviously his career so far. But guys like that, and I know a lot of the other pros have worked with you as well, but when you talk about because one thing I mentioned that one time, for a lot of these players wanted to work on speed, go get a track coach, go get somebody or a track athlete that can teach you how to run properly and move your body properly. So for anybody who's looking to get quicker and get faster, what advice would you give them on that side of it, as far as working with someone like yourself that, understands the mechanics of running and just the body movement? Because I was amazed, honestly, on how it translated to the on-ice piece, and how, some of these athletes that worked with you, how it translated that turnover, that quickness. It was awesome. So yeah, what advice would you give to these parents and these players that are looking for something like that?
I think the biggest thing, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Blazer, was that even you who's been in the sport for years, this is still a new concept. And Mitch and yourself both saw it's taken a couple of years for the players to get their buy-in on speed work and track work is important. And I think the biggest thing that we stress to parents is that just like a wrist shot, or just like skating, or just like understanding the game, hockey IQ, speed and the mechanics of speed is a skill. You might be born faster than somebody else, but you need to master the skill of becoming faster. And all these things, whether it's in the weight room or whether it's on the ice, the mechanics of it translate across a lot of these aspects that we're trying to teach athletes at every age, not just pros, all the way down to if you're coming in 12, 13, 14, where this is vital for growing your speed and strength. I think understanding and giving it the respect that it deserves, and that it's a skill, and you can't just blast a 30-meter sprint and be like, oh yeah, I'm good. When you actually start doing speed workouts, you need to do them properly, or else you're not going to get any faster. You'll just maintain that same speed. But until you understand the function of why you're doing things, in mastering those fundamentals, you're never going to actually excel and get faster. You'll always maintain that same speed. And really across a lot of the mechanics, I mean, I know skating and I don't want to draw too many parallels, but skating and running or sprinting, they're on different planes, but a lot of the mechanics of extension, through your hips and creating power and proper knee drives, all that kind of stuff, all these things help both sports. And so that's what we're starting to see a lot more buy-in with a lot of athletes, because they're seeing the benefits of doing that.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge. And we talked about this as well. And, we've all, the three of us had this conversation before too, but whether it's a squat or it's a quick start, the better your technique is, the more speed and power you're gonna be able to generate over time. Right. So meaning, like, if you've got terrible squat technique, you're not going to be able to push. You're going to plateau at some point. Whereas if your technique's really good, you may still hit a plateau, but it's going to be way further up. You're going to be able to push way more weight. You're going to be able to do way more things with proper movement. And it's the same thing with skating and running, all that stuff. So I think you're right. It is a skill. And I think it's really, really important for people to understand that you gotta get better at that skill, number one, but you got to work at it, man. And some of the stuff, like Mitch made some good points about just, some of the stuff is warm up stuff. It's not running. It's not going to the track and running 10, 20 sprints. It's working on your A's, your ABCs, working on a lot of that stuff and just getting that technique down and then translating that into
and something like that. I think a lot of people really need to appreciate is the coach's eye on that stuff. Cause I mean, A skips, all that, those things are things that I did not have the same understanding of that I do now, and still have a ways to go since Josh started. Like, even just seeing him do those movements and break them down and give athletes cues on how to do them. Not a lot of it was necessarily new, but my appreciation for the number of details within a movement like that it's unbelievable. Like, and the difference is that those little changes that, honestly, before I met Josh, I would not have noticed or been able to coach. Those are the things that make the difference. Like,
I don't want to pump Josh's tires too much.
No, not too.
He already has his head's big, and I don't want to get it too big. And he's got but the one thing too, and Mitch, you bring up something that I want to point out to parents out there is, and coaches too, because coaches do this all the time. Oh yeah, like let's say we're coming out to a session. Let's say I'm going out to a session and I'm going to work with your team on quick starts, and the coach will be like, "Oh yeah, no, we already do that. We always work on this stuff." Okay. But what you just said, Mitch, like, I've done ABCs, I've done that stuff. And then I watched Josh do it. I'm like, I do not do it like that.
I don't do that.
Taught it. Like, I used to do strength training. I used to be in the gym. I taught guys how to do this stuff. And I'm like, I have like, and so I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable in the strength and conditioning area, not with you guys, but that, like, and I see what he's doing. I'm like, I'm sending my kid to him. I'm not teaching my kid the ABCs. Like, I'm sending them to him. Like, and this is the thing with like a strength coach. Like, oh yeah, no, we already do squats. Don't worry. They all know how to do squats. And then you watch them do a squat. You're like, no, they don't, man. Their technique's terrible. And I think it looks great, right? So it's going to these experts and finding, because you're right, man. That's the key to going to a coach. Like you guys said, like, it's one thing to go out and do your ABCs, look at them on YouTube and like be like, okay, I get it. And then having a coach there just to give you some advice on it, whether it's through virtual sessions or whether it's, you know what I mean? It's that makes the world of the difference. It's right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it's cool to see it. I'm glad you both brought this up. The idea behind just, you don't necessarily need to do a speed workout. And I think as we get into this conversation a little bit, I know we're not making Olympic track athletes. So I think that's a very key distinction between our speed training and, like, an Andre DeGrasse who's getting ready to go to Tokyo. Like, I wouldn't coach him. He, we're not doing Olympic sprinting, but what we're doing is translating speed across sports. So all the fundamentals. And so it's cool that you can do these drills in a warm up, and not, we have our speed workouts, but all this stuff is super important to just continue to do day after day after day. So it becomes just rhythm. And that's a big thing with speed training and really any sport across that. Once you get rhythm and once you get body awareness, things just start clicking. And it's really cool. It's really cool to see. So it doesn't mean like you have to be there for an hour, but when you do these little things, you focus on them for that 10 or 15 minutes. You come 10 or 15 minutes early to do a warm up instead of just popping right in. It's like, it's fantastic just to put those little things in and those little small details, and it goes across the board.
Yeah, I know I think that's huge for sure, man. I know that's good. All right, we'll get to a question here. So first question we've got. I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can see it as well. But so the best way to become more of a playmaker, right? So I'll talk about this quickly on the on-ice side. I think the biggest thing when we think of playmakers and guys that you guys know, like Konechny or Suzuki, and Bo Horvat, like there's a lot of guys that make really good plays on the ice. I think the biggest thing to become a good playmaker is on-ice awareness and working on being aware of your surroundings. So if you're shooting pucks at home or you're stick handling at home, looking around your body, not always staring at the puck or staring at the net, but looking around and being aware and being able to control a puck, skate, back check, whatever you're doing, but looking, because when we say shoulder check or look over your shoulder, just looking around, it sounds super easy and super elementary, but it's really hard. And when you get into game situations, it's even harder to have those habits ingrained. So the more you can practice them at home and the more you can work on it, I think it's massive. I think it's so huge. And the other thing I would say about this is kind of goes in like hockey IQ is when you're watching games, focus on how the plays are happening and what's going on in the play and not necessarily the goals or the big hits or the, the line brawls or whatever's going on, but looking at like what's happening on the pass, how that pass happened, what happened on that hit to create the space to make that pass. But kind of looking at the game and being more of a student of the game, I think is huge as well. But I think as far as your on-ice performance as a player, I think on-ice awareness is massive. Not better. It's huge.
Blaiser, how easily can you teach hockey IQ? If you're wanting to be a playmaker, is that something that you can develop just like anything else?
It's really, it's probably the hardest skill to develop. Like some kids just have it, and going over names and not to like name drop and stuff, but like a guy like Nick Suzuki, he has it. Ryan Suzuki's brother, their hockey IQ's off the charts. Super, super smart.
Both of them, yeah. Yeah,
it's crazy. They see stuff happening before it happens. Player pass to an area and like what's going on, and before you can finish the sentence, the play's made. And you're like, oh wow, okay. There's a lot of guys that have that knack of just like Crosby's, obviously Gretzky's, like these guys that are high level, and then there's a lot of other players that are unbelievable. Unbelievable hockey IQs. The biggest thing with hockey IQ though is it is teachable to a certain extent. It's just like soft hands or a sprinter. Like, you can teach Mitch, myself, and 7 other guys how to sprint properly and become, great sprinters. But some of those group of 10 are going to be way better than the rest of us just because they have that natural ability, right? So there's a little bit of that. But I guarantee I would become a way better runner if I trained and I trained properly. You know what I mean? So I think with hockey IQ, it's just it's honestly, man, being a student of the game and looking at the game differently. Don't look at, just focusing on like how plays work, looking at a player that you like a lot and what they do well, and then going to practice that as well is huge. But a lot of it does come back to on-ice awareness. A lot of players play with their head down. A lot of players aren't aware of what's going on around them, so they get boxed in a lot and then they panic. So the more you're aware of what's around you, then you can make plays and you can create ice. You can see what's going on. So I think, there's a lot there, but I think that's the biggest thing for me, man, for players to get better and understand the game better is be aware on the ice. It's huge.
Something Wade brought up a couple weeks ago that I thought was pretty cool, actually, is he was saying he was at a billet's house or something like that. At the time they were billeting Dave Bolin. A bunch of people were over. It sounded like it was like pretty busy in the house or whatever. But apparently Dave Bolin sitting in front of the TV making notes, like had a notepad out, making notes of what guys are doing on the ice and stuff like that, which is totally. To your point, it's exactly what he's doing. He's being like a student of the game, and it's pretty cool.
No, definitely, man. I think that's awesome.
I thought that was a cool story.
Here's another one here. So Thomas has a couple here. So thanks a lot, Thomas. And if anyone else has any questions, fire them in, and we'll get to them, and we'll answer any questions that come in here tonight. But tips to stand out from other players in exposure events, and I think. And I want to lean on you guys a little bit on this as well. But I think when you think of exposure events, that could be, a combine. Maybe it's an on-ice showcase weekend with some off-ice testing, like an OHL Cups or an OHL combine or an NHL combine. Could be, any kind of or a showcase on the ice. I think the one thing with my biggest tip for anybody to stand out in an event is do what you do well. So if you're a skater, skate. If you can hit. If you're an energy guy, play with energy. If you're a scorer, shoot the puck. If you're a playmaker, make passes. I think when players go to showcases, sometimes they try to play outside their realm. They try to become a massive playmaker when they're not a playmaker, or they try to be a dangler when they're not a dangler. So I think playing within your realm, and a lot of times, we don't think of this as young players, but that scout or whoever's looking or whoever's watching, they might not be looking for a guy to score 50 goals. They already have a guy who can score 50 goals. They want a guy that can block a shot. They want a guy that can get the puck out of the boards. They want a girl that can make a play at the blue line and get the puck in deep. So just play within yourself. And I think, really focus on that part of it. For you guys, one question I'm gonna ask you guys: let's say a player is getting ready to go to a showcase, right? So let's say it has a combine piece to it, so an off ice kind of testing or whatever, right? Would you guys train those players specifically for those tests, or just train those players to become better athletes and they're going to perform better on those tests? And you probably look at those tests and like, if there's ways to work on their technique on those tests, I think that's huge, but you're not spending 3 weeks working on the 5-10-5 and running from cone to cone, right? Like you're kind of making athletes, and then those tests, they're going to perform better anyway.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome point to bring up, because I think a lot of people, that's the first thing they want to see at testing is what are the tests, and then that if push-ups are in the test or pull-ups or whatever, they're getting they're doing those things every single day, and that's not even the best way to train for that if that is what you were doing. Yeah. But no, to answer your question, it's exactly that. We follow a very similar process with all the athletes that we work with, and it starts from fundamentals and building progressively a variety of different training parameters, and we know that as we improve that, whatever testing is thrown at them, provided it's sport specific to their sport, they're going to do well with it. Like, I mean, if we're working with a volleyball player and then there's for some reason a 5K run in their testing, that's not very volleyball specific, and we were probably training them to be volleyball specific, so they might not be amazing at that. Right. But it provided the testing protocol fits the performance that they need for their sport they're in. Our focus is on developing them for their sport, not for a test or a set of testing. Yeah. And you can go ahead there too, Josh.
Well, I was just going to say on both things, to go on what Blaiser was saying too. I remember, and I don't mean to put Matt Murphy on blast right now, but he
he likes it.
A couple of years ago, if anybody knows this player, he was a head case, and he and I sat down. For a good chat after, because his times were getting faster compared to himself, but not getting fast enough to where he wanted to be. And we he and I have a good relationship, so we had a good conversation saying that he's never going to be as fast as Brett Sini. He's never going to be as fast as Konechny, but he's faster than what he was, and he needs to work. He needs to find his niche. What are you good at? How do you excel at that? And that's how you're going to get found. Right, you are your technician at your specific role, and I think, and he's told me since, that's a huge part of his mindset now, is that he develops what he's good at. He makes sure he gets stronger at what he's weak at, but he doesn't worry about being the fastest on the ice, because he's never going to be the fastest on the ice. But will he be a technician, and will he be smooth and not make mistakes? Yes, and that's something that has started to alleviate a little bit of pressure. So when you go to combines, worry about what you're good at. Excel at what you're good at, so you stand out in that one area. And you want to get better at across the whole map, but you need to excel at one thing to stand out. And so that I think that story really resonated there. But as far as training, it's the same thing Mitch was saying. We train athletes, and I will go to my deathbed saying better athletes will train better at combines. If you're an athlete and you've been doing all the work, you are going to excel at a combine. If you're an athlete who's just benched for 3 months straight and forgot that, a combine might have 6 or 7 different events, you might crush bench, but you forgot the other athletic events and athletic endeavors that have to go into a combine. So if you're training to be athletic and be better in your sport athletically, you're going to crush a combine. I think it's a no-brainer. Yeah. And the one last piece of advice that I think I would hold true on is that you don't, in Blaiser, I know you're pretty loud, so you might go against me on this, but at combines or testings, I've always held true to the fact that you don't want to be the loudest in the room. Like you want to be a leader, a quiet leader. You want to lead by example rather than lead by with your voice. Like you look like a guy like Cousins when he started coming in this year, quiet, but he has a presence around him. You want to own that presence. You don't need to have a presence, by screaming and being like the funny guy, or you want to have a presence by dominating everybody else and just acting like you've done it a million times before.
You know what, man?
I think that stands out to coaches.
I think all of us agree with that. I think that's I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think the biggest thing there, the biggest takeaway there for me is, you bring up Dylan Cousins, and for anyone who doesn't know, Dylan Cousins obviously World Junior, and plays for Buffalo Sabres this year, and has had a really good year for rookie and on a tough team, obviously that have been playing a lot. But you talk about a quiet leader; he's definitely a leader. And I think when you go to those combines or you're in a showcase tournament where you're on the ice and there's scouts watching and you're kind of nervous, obviously, I think, yeah, not the guy hoot and holler all the time, but just even like they're watching. If anytime you're in a showcase event, there's scouts or whoever's there watching, they're watching everything. So how you interact with somebody after they did an event, hey, good job. Hey, nice. Hey, man, you got a personal best. That's awesome. And like Josh, you've competed in real high level track. Mitch, you've competed in a bunch of competitions with like Olympic lifting, things like that. I mean, you don't want to lose. You don't want that guy to get his personal best. Like you want to win. You know what I mean? I don't want him to score a hat trick. I'm pissed off about it. Let's be honest. Yeah. I'm mad. I'm not mad, but I'm like, I want to score a hat trick, right?
Yeah.
It's a bigger guy or girl to go up and say, hey man, good job. Like, hey, great job scoring that hat trick, or hey, nice job. So I think those are things that go, I think, really, really notice with the right people. The guy that's loud and boisterous, or the girl that's loud and hoot and hollering and comes in with the ripped off shirt and like all jacked, like they're hiding something in my mind. There's something else there. Like what's behind the door in that closet. Right. So I think it's really important to just, do what you do well. Like you said, Josh, have confidence in yourself and, go out and perform. And the other thing too is there's this whole saying, and everyone's heard this who's played hockey, like you don't score goals in the gym. No one ever scores goals from the gym. Like, okay, totally fine. And you can go up, there's a lot of examples of this, of players going to the combine and not even being able to do a pull-up or doing nothing on the bench press, or max is terrible and they become superstars in the NHL and they're all-stars. Like, you know what I mean? So it's not the end of the world if you don't do well on testing, but at the end of the day, the more you can prepare as an athlete, like you were saying, Mitch, the better you're going to perform, right? So
I'm actually I'm happy you brought that one up, because like if you walk in our gym, like nobody looks like a bodybuilder. Nobody looks like nobody's like amazing at bench press or amazing at, any of these weightlifting things, but they're very well rounded, and we develop them with the intent, like with the purpose for like hockey. And that doesn't make them look like anything special. It doesn't make them show up to combines necessarily and do 100 bench press with 135 pounds. Like it's not, because you're right, you don't score goals from the gym, and that one, it grinds me, but it keeps people healthy, and like it allows us to it allows you to play. Actually, you kind of do, because you can play more games if you're healthy all the time.
No, the gym
and we've seen it over and over again. Is like we've had players that have come to us where they've missed games throughout seasons, like regularly, and then they start training the way that we train, and then all of a sudden they're playing more games. So I mean, it's hard for young people to see that because they're not missing games yet because they haven't beat their bodies up enough yet. Yeah. But if you start those routines when you're young, hopefully you can skip that entire phase of missing times because you got aches and pains and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you take a shot in the foot or whatever. Those are things that you can't train to avoid that stuff. But in terms of like strains and little impingements and stuff like that, if you're training well, those things shouldn't happen. And a lot of times the people who take the gym really seriously in terms of like bodybuilding, and they do basically bodybuilding programs, they end up with more impingements and injuries and stuff like that. And we see that all the time too. Like, to me, it's somewhat of a red flag when a player comes into Knights camp and they jump 19 inches and then bench press 155 30 times. I'm like, I don't know, man. That's it's not necessarily bad, but it's a bit of a red flag because the way you're training is not probably athletic.
Well, and it's imbalanced, right? And I think that's
totally
right. If you can't jump high and you're benching crazy, clearly you've been working a lot more on upper body than you have been on other things, being explosive or whatever. So I think, yeah, you're right. And as again, going back to this whole thing we're talking about, but like being a keen coach in your field, like you pick that stuff up just by that. You see testing results, you're like, okay, wait a second, something's off here. You know what I mean? And I think that's another piece of this whole thing of like, and I'm not for 1 minute promoting that everyone has to have a personal strength coach and a personal skills coach, but I'm just saying like there's people like Mitch or like Josh or like even myself, or there's tons of them out there that are good and available that you can talk to. You can ask questions to, send them an email, DM them, like, you know what I mean? And you can get some answers that'll help you with your development. And I think that's massive, Yeah. All right, we'll go one more here. Thomas got a hat trick. This is his third one. Thomas has got a hat trick. So tips on handling the mental, and I love this, man. Like if I was a young guy or a parent, which I am a parent, but like in a field that I had that I was maybe like just trying to navigate a bit, ask questions, man. This is the best way to know, like to figure out answers. And if you think our answers are good, great. I think we've all had experiences in different levels. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding of this stuff, but tips on handling the mental aspect of the game. So for example, handling nerves before a big game. And I think I'm going to get you to start on this one, Josh, because I don't even know, like I've played in some big games and some big events and stuff, which has been awesome, but I've never represented my country at the Olympics. So for you, like what was that like as far as just, being in the Olympic Village, getting ready for that big event, like, and whether you're going to medal, you're not going to medal, whatever you're going, you're on TV, family and friends are watching back home. Like if you slip or fall, like, you look like an idiot. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's all these things going through your head. So how do you like, I mean, what did you do? Like, what did you do?
Well, not only slip and fall, but I got messed. I got my helmet stuck after one of the races. And so the strap was on, I was trying to rip it off. I was all pumped up. And the amount of friends who texted me because I was on TV with that screenshot of me with just my chin strap of this thing across my face. Like, way to go, buddy. Like your one-time shot.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's so I never dove too much in. I'll try to keep this story short because the mental side of my career between track and bobsled was huge, and I didn't realize it until I got to the Olympics. But it's really interesting the places that you'll go to find your motivation, and to find your confidence in order to get ready for big events. So I'll say two examples. One was I think 3 weeks before the Olympics. They're basically about to announce the Olympic team, and they have what's called a push off, which in my position, because I was sort of a fringe guy, I had a chance to either I was going to be a spare or on a team. Anyways, I came down to one push. So 4 years of training and traveling and sacrifice, and came down to one push. And if I output this other guy,
like came down to one push, we were talking
25 seconds.
Okay, so 25 seconds to see if you're going to be on the Olympic team or not. Basically,
like 5 seconds.
Sorry, 5 seconds. Yeah. So like that's crazy. Like a 5-second push to see if you're going to be representing Canada at the Olympics or not. Yeah, that
not to mention that you've been training for how many years?
4 years
to get to this point.
Yeah, and so I remember I went to a dark place. I went to a dark place. It was like, and I ended up I've dubbed it like the demon of disappointment. And I was going through my head like 5 minutes before. I was like thinking about, my wife who's sacrificed a lot, my parents who have sacrificed a lot, my grandma, like everybody, friends, everybody who have allowed me to do this for 4 years. Because news alert, you don't make a lot of money as an Olympic athlete. So, you got everybody supporting, and you're like, holy shit, now's the time. And so then you start building up that confidence, and you start thinking, well, I have all this support. I have all this energy and commitment. I've trained 4 years. Like your head game just starts going. You're like, I'm ready for this. There's no reason why it can't be me. And so you start to find that like intrinsic motivation where you're like, here is how I got here. Trust that path. And I think that was a really important moment for me to trust that you are meant to be where you are. You are good enough, you're confident enough, you have that skill, and now this is actually your time to shine. So it's not nerves. Nerves are a normal thing. I think if you don't get nervous, then you're not quite prepared. Nervous is like, to me at that point, I started to realize nervous is like, now this is my shot. I've worked so hard to get to this point. And so the nerves were like, here we go. And then in 5 seconds, it's done. And so when I got to the Olympics, it was a total different kind of nerves. Now you're like, okay, I am here. Now this is new territory. So if you're, I've got to imagine, not on the same level, but if you're an NHL player and you go to Stanley Cup, and you've never been there before, having the, media week, all this kind of stuff, it's not just a hockey game. And so as much as they want to tell you it's just a hockey game, I'm sure it's a circus all around. So these are different things that try to divert your attention away from the actual event. Yeah. When it boils down, it's the same event, right? You're playing a hockey game, or you're pushing a sled. Wherever you are in the world, you're doing the same thing, but it's everything else. And And so aside from looking on the start block, going ready to go down my first push, and seeing again my wife, my in-laws, my sister, everybody right there, I was like, shit, if I slip, I am done. Like, I am an absolute clown.
They'll be calling
you
sport. Be like, hey, switch it up, boys. Let's go.
I'm gonna be on Sports Center top 10 on how to ruin your country's flag. They travel from Canada to South Korea just to see me make a fool of myself.
Yeah.
But no, I think the cool part of doing that is that when you really try to focus on that big game, like the Olympics, it comes down to trying to really erase all the other distractions. So if you have a big game, you need to clear your head. We had a routine, and I would suggest everybody to get a routine. If you have a routine, it starts to set your body into a certain position. So it's the same thing as gym. Like if people come into the gym, like our ASAT students, they start with a warm-up. The warm-up is their body routine. They get ready, they get prepped. We had our own warm-up. We had a mental coach, and I remember one of the most important things that he was saying was replacing the picture. That was like the biggest lesson he taught us that year. Was a lot of people go like, what I did last game, or I dumped the puck in, I did the crappy play before, or for me it's like, yeah, I screwed up this push before. But he said once you start thinking about that, you need to learn and teach yourself to replace the picture, because that will start bringing those positive mindset. And so when our pilot crashed a bunch, one specific turn couldn't get it, and so he was starting to replace the pitcher and nailed it. And so I think that mental side of the game and putting your body into a routine where, regardless if it's exhibition or Stanley Cup Finals, you have that routine where you were just set to go.
Yeah,
and that sets you up.
I think that's huge, man. I think that's why people being really superstitious, right? And he's so superstitious, and which totally. But that goes back to that whole routine. And Crosby's a player that a lot of people talk about that's very superstitious. And if something happens, let's say he takes a right turn instead of a left turn on the game and he gets a hat trick, he's going to take that right turn for the next 5-6 games until things go south, right? Yeah. So, which is fine, but I think that is important, man, to have that routine and be a little bit not crazy scheduled where it gets in your head. So then you're thinking in the first game, like, oh my God, I didn't do this. Am I gonna, so that's a bit overboard, but there is something to having a routine. And I love, those stories are awesome, man. I think that is great. And
I think athletes by nature are routine driven. Like athletes are robots. They love routine. They love structure, even though you might not admit it. I think everybody works better under structure and routine, and athletes are at the top of that. And I think being able to develop that, so you can separate big game or not, you're doing the same thing. And so your body goes in confident with the same thing.
Yeah, totally.
Hey Josh, just to clarify on the reframing thing, is that essentially too like so if you have a vision of yourself messing up in the past, you're reframing that and seeing yourself do it successfully? Like, is that's essentially what that reframing process looks like at a basic level?
If you get pinned at 300 pounds on the bench and you're like, crap, like you go in, you're under it, and you're like, I'm always getting pinned at this. And you lift it up, and guess what? You're going to get pinned. But now before you go in, you do your little mindset, and you're like, no, I can visualize myself dropping this thing on my chest, but I'm not. I'm going to visualize myself on what I need to do, get this feeling, get it up, and push through it.
Good example. Yeah. Okay, good.
So when you get pinned all the time, that's what you should do.
When I was, and I know that's got some inside info here, but when I was young, probably in Bantam or midget, so I was like 13, 14, and our coach came in and got us to visualize, so got us to like sit on our benches, we're in full gear, but like think about what you're gonna do well today in the game. And this is back, I mean, let's be honest, like 20 years ago, right? So back then, that was like new cutting, like that was new age, like that was not normal for us. Like as young kids, you turn the lights out, we'd all be closing our eyes, and clearly, like, someone would fart and everyone would laugh, or someone would say something, so like but I still remember it, man. And I got into that habit a little bit more as I got older, to just visualize a little bit because of that. A lot of my buddies thought it was ridiculous and never would have done it ever again, right? And I'm not saying I was ahead of the curve, but it had value to me. I could see myself stick handling, or I could see myself shooting the puck. So what you're saying, Josh, I think is huge. And going back, this is a super long-winded answer, but for Thomas, I think one of those things when you're going into big events is, being prepared, obviously being confident what you are, but also like, calming those nerves down a little bit by visualizing, and you don't have to be sitting there with candles on and, and a little bit of music playing in the background. You can just be listening to your tunes, having a coffee or having a protein bar and just thinking about what you're going to do that night or what you're going to do in that game. And I think that is huge to just kind of like calm things down. And it's okay to have nerves. I think for anybody out there, it's okay to have nerves. It's just
absolutely it is.
Make sure that they don't overtake you, basically, right? We've got another one here. So we got one from Damian Warble, and really good. It's kind of two-parter, so I'll just pull up one part of it. But so it said problem with stress in hockey, but he's basically said really good hockey player in training, but not in a game. So we see this all the time, especially on the skill development side. We see players that are like, man, you watch them in practice, like this kid's sick. This guy or this girl's unbelievable. Like goes through all the drills, shoots a puck well, passes well. And then they get in games and they're terrible, like legit terrible. And I've seen it, man. Players in practice that are unbelievable, like probably top 3 on the ice in practice. And then in games, they're bottom 3. And I think one of the biggest things with that, there's a couple different reasons. And I want your input on this too, guys, because you see it probably, in your sports and your fields as well. But one of the biggest things is I think a lot of players are trained to be really good in practice. And that's our fault as skill coaches and coaches on the ice. They go around cones, they do patterns, maybe there's no static in practice, no pressure in practice. So they're never getting confronted. They're never getting hit. They're never getting bumped. Right. So that's not good. We need to put our players in situations that they're going to face in game and practice. So meaning if, we know we're going to get bumped, let's say we're playing, 13, 14 plus where there's going to be contact. We know we're going to get bumped. So put them in situations where they're going to get hit, where they're going to have, some coaches involved or, something to go around that's not just a stationary pylon and a cone. Right. But I think that's the one thing that we need to really help these players out with. And the other thing too, I think a lot of times is just players get shy. And a lot of times in practice, there's no one's going to hurt you in practice. And what I mean by that is not that in, 11-year-old hockey, anyone's out to hurt anybody, but in 11-year-old hockey, that other player on the other team wants the puck. They're going to come get the puck off you. Right. So a lot of players don't understand or don't know how to play in that aggressive, in that, I want the puck back. So I'm not just going to give it away. Right. So I think adding situations in practice as a coach or a skills coach or whoever, that is huge to get players to be in a better environment for games. So trying to create more of a game-like environment in practice in order for them to be better in games is kind of what I would say with this. But if you guys go ahead and shoot on this. But I think it is really important because even in the gym, you see guys that are like beach body, they look good, they're shredded, and then you go throw them a basketball and it's like it hits them in the nose. Like what? Like you're jacked or you look very athletic, but you can't even like accept the basketball. You know what I mean? It's like. So we got to expose these athletes to different things to help them become better athletes, and better in different situations. So I don't know if you guys have any stories or any stuff that you want to share, but
I got to show you a video of Mitch doing a layup. I think he might be
keep that video to yourself.
No, I think you nailed that, Blaiser. I think the biggest thing that we've seen with practices now and then is, people don't like being tired. They don't like working out after practice or before, or they got a big game coming up. It's a different mindset. But I think it's really important to practice top speed. Doesn't need to be all the time, but full game speed or for us, full hard pushes. I think getting that under your belt is really important to do in order to prepare yourself when it's actually the game. And that's the same thing how we prep bodies. It's something that we keep saying, if we're doing game day prep, don't be scared of doing a couple cleans or some bench or some squats and jumps before, because there's a lot of research behind prepping your body before a game. And so there's a lot. I think there's a change in sport now that's starting to come, that you don't need to just take 2 days off, or I got a game on the weekend, so I'm going to do mobility for 2 days. Like you need to practice and continue your body moving at a full speed or close to it, whatever in your program is. And then the only other thing I got to say is a lot of people need to stay out of their own way. We see that all the time. Yeah. They're great, and then they all of a sudden that mental side isn't there. And so if you're an athlete across any sport who has that issue, I think you got to look into mental training because it's super effective for a lot of people, being able to not be two different athletes. And I used to be in track. I spent a whole year. Used to be a pole. I spent a whole year just being a head case. I didn't even get off the ground. Like, I was insane. It was brutal. And just because I was scared and I didn't know what I was doing. I had been doing it for 10 years, and then I all of a sudden forgot. No, I didn't all of a sudden forget the skill. I forgot the mental side.
Josh, it is crazy how the mental part of your brain can screw you up so bad. I got another quick story on this after, but keep going. Go.
No, that's all I gotta say. It's mental training is super important. When if you're noticing that's half the battle, is that you're admitting to yourself, I'm way better in practice than I am in the game. Well,
totally.
I think it's really important to look into what you're doing, what your mindset is going into that. And maybe it's negative self-talk. Maybe it's setting your standards so low so you reach them. Like, like little things like that, I think are detrimental to performance, like actually when it's supposed to matter.
Okay, but Josh, let me ask you this. So when you couldn't hit your mark on pole vault, so you were doing really well, and then all of a sudden it just wasn't happening for you, right?
Yeah.
Were you, like, when you were ready to go and you're getting ready to go, what was your self-talk though? It was like, I'm going to muff this. I
knew before I started running that I wasn't going to get off the ground. Yeah.
100%. It's like us as like hot golfers. I go to a ball, there's a lake there, there's a pond there. I'm like, I'm going to hit the water. Well, what do? I hit the water. Right. So like it's and I know this sounds super cheesy, but that is the biggest thing. I left college, like finished my college up. We wrapped our season up. I went and played pro right after. So I went for like 2-3 weeks at the end of a season, went and played professional hockey. It was awesome. It was unreal. I had a really good run. It was great. I think I played 8 games. I think I had like 7 points in 8 games, which I was even like, whoa, that was crazy. So they signed me for the next year. So I got to go home that summer knowing that I got a professional contract for the following year, which is awesome. Like, this is great. I know where I'm playing. I don't have to worry about anything this summer. I have to try calling teams. It's awesome, right? So everything's good. Train hard like I normally would. Like, I'm ready to go down I go down like a week early because I knew a lot of the guys because I'd played there the year before. So I went down a week or 2 early, started skating with the guys. So we're just skating, just the boys, like just 10, 12 of us skating in down in Carolina. It's awesome, right? I could not hit anybody with a pass on the tape, which like I've done this my whole life. Like, so guys would literally be going down the boards and I'd hit them like 3 feet behind them. It was almost to the point where I was like, what? But it was exactly what you're saying, John. Everything I taught, every time I touched the puck, I was second guessing what I'm doing. And before I even got to the ice rink, I knew I was going to suck that day. And I'm beating myself up mentally. And then I get on the ice and I clearly sucked. And it was unbelievable, man. And I remember to this day, it was one of those things where I was like, this is crazy. Like, there's no way I can't hit a guy that's 20 feet away from me, tape to tape. And I couldn't do it, man. And then finally, like, I got out of that funk, but it was nuts, man. So I get exactly where you're coming from. And it's really, really, really frustrating. And that's the one thing that, like you said, like that change in the image, changing that picture is huge. Visualizing, all those things to help kind of calm those nerves, obviously, but get you, back to like being better, as an athlete, number one. And then obviously in performance is huge for sure.
Exactly. Because it could get deflating and it could take a long time to get out of that rut too.
Oh, totally.
Quick on this one too, just to kind of wrap it on this, but something we've talked about a lot is game applicable skills. And you already touched on this on making practices more game applicable, but I just, the more you talk about that and the more I like see on Instagram and all these things, like different ways of stick handling, and like, there's a certain amount of applicable bits to all these things, but I think so you can be really good in training, but just really good in training, I don't know what that means. Maybe it means you're really good at stick handling on a wobble board, or you're really good at flipping the puck on the wall and then doing a trick with it and then spin it. You know what? I don't know. Like, but I see stuff like that on Instagram, and it's like, it's just so important that players are understanding what is highly applicable in a game when they're learning it in training, I think. And if they're doing that other stuff, it's fine. But even just to be able to differentiate it in their minds, that the level of applicability to this other stuff is just, it's not huge. And because I think you could psych yourself out thinking like so good in training. And that may not be the case here, but what you're doing in training game applicable, or does it look cool? Is it fancy? Is it stuff that other players can't do? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make you a better player.
And I think that's where Dwayne and the guys set themselves apart on that.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Well, the biggest, like one of the things that, and I've got another question here from Damien Damien, thanks so much for the questions, Damien. But I think my big thing and my big, one thing I'm trying to really preach and talk about is game applicable skills. Yes, scooping the puck behind the net and tucking it over goalie's shoulder can work. 100% it can work. There's one guy in the NHL that does it really well, maybe two or three, and a bunch of guys have tried it and never done it. And you're talking about the best of the best of the best. The best 700 hockey players in the world, let's be honest, right? And there's some great players in Europe, don't get me wrong, but this happens a handful of times in a year where guys can scoot the puck. So you're a young kid that's 12, 13, don't have fun doing it, try it out 100%, but that's not the skill that's going to bring you that much success. You know what I mean? So to your point, you got to really focus on the things that are going to be game applicable. What works in a game? Protecting the puck, that's huge. Getting a shot off quick, that's massive, right? So I think practicing properly is massive, man. I think that is such a huge thing. And going back to this, I want to bring this up right now just because this is perfect for what we're talking about. But Damien asked, how can I make game situations in training, right? Like in games, and he said, sorry for his bad English. So Damien, no problem. I totally understand it. But so when we talk about, or when I talked about in a practice, make it game situational for your players, right? Which that's easy to say, but how do you do that? And that's how do you make it game situational for players? And I think the biggest thing is when you look at a game, or let's say you just had a game on a Saturday and you couldn't make a breakout pass. So you were getting the puck to the wing and then the wing was fumbling it and it didn't work, right? Well, go back on that Monday or Tuesday, and whenever you have your next practice, and work on that breakout with no pressure. Just let them work on the pass. Let's say puck's behind the net, D gets it, gives it to the winger moves it to the middle. Breakout, no pressure at all. Let them do that. Let them get reps in. Let them get comfortable with it. Let them execute the passes. And if your players can't make two passes, then you got to go back to, let's go back to passing, right? Don't go back to the breakout because that's ridiculous. Let's go back to fundamentals of passing. Does that make sense, guys? If you can't pass the puck, you can't break out. So let's go back to passing the puck. But let's say you can pass the puck. So now you're going to make that. Now, on that, add some pressure. So add just a coach coming in, just one coach coming in, adding a little bit of pressure. So that D-man who's coming around the net has to make a decision on where he's going to make the pass, whether he's going to hit the middle or whether he's going to hit the wing. And then from there, then you add maybe a couple of players coming in and adding pressure. And so you set up situations where you have pressure to make these players make plays. And I think the other thing too is if I'm working with players and they're going, let's say around the boards, around the net to make a play, if they cut back and go the opposite side of the net, I love it. Be creative, right? Don't just get stuck doing the pattern I'm telling you to do. Be creative and go the other way and then make that play. Be creative, make plays, do things that are going to make sense for you. And I think that's massive, right? So I think setting up any drill that you're doing, but setting it up in a situation where you can, manipulate it a little bit, but also where you can make sure that you're adding pressure to the players. So they have to make decisions. They have to keep their head up. They have to watch what's going on. And then also that they're being creative and they are, using those skills that you're teaching them, protecting the puck, getting their eyes up, being aware on the ice. So I think to answer your question, Damien, I think it's just the biggest thing is, man, put them in situations where they have to think. Let them think, let them communicate, let them work together, let them help each other out. I think that's massive. So, that's my kind of 2 cents on it. Mitch, I don't know if you or Josh have anything that you want to add to that, but that's my 2 cents on the on kind of how to make players do things that are more applicable.
I think that really ties everything together well too. In terms of being a student of the game, so you're recognizing the things that you've maybe done in a game that you need to work on, and then you're bringing that stuff to practice specifically. So a lot of the stuff we talked about today kind of ties into that game applicable skills, being a student of the game, how to take those two things and turn that into, into practice. You can put both those things in there. It's awesome.
Here's one for you, Josh. We got Matty Murph, boys. Matty Murph. Look at him. Yes, Jay Vaughan. Loves it.
Hey? His ears were burning, eh?
Yeah, Matty Murph doesn't mind being called a mental mushroom once in a while. That's right. Hey, Matty Murph, we were all mental mushrooms, buddy. We were all mental mushrooms at times in our careers.
The key word there is were. We
Yeah.
were.
Yeah, but hey, buddy, we're complete mental mushrooms now. We're all married and kind of doing our thing now. So come on, here we go.
Yeah, I think he gets a shout out on every podcast or anything that I do.
You
He's
should.
got
Man.
You
it
should,
in
yeah.
now.
Good dude, hard worker, great dude, for sure. We've got one. So
He's the speed OG. He's the first one who bought in.
Yeah, totally. Hey, a question that came up that got sent to me through the week, and I want to get to this. I know we're running here about 50 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep it to about an hour. But again, if anyone has questions, feel free to fire away. You guys can throw them in the comments, and we'll answer them. Anything about anything, hockey skills, whatever, doesn't matter. But I had a couple questions about best ways to train stamina. Like my kid dies out after a 20-second shift, or in the third period, their dog, they can't play anymore by the third period. What recommendations do you guys have as far as working on stamina? So if you're at home, you're working on stuff, you're trying to get fit. And I'll be on, I'll just give a quick little background, because I know a lot of people that are listening may be like my age-ish, which is like older school, but like for us, like, oh, go for a run, go for a 10-kilometer run. I don't believe in that. I think, a run is great. I think maybe going for like a 3-kilometer, 5-kilometer hard, like pushing yourself, or doing a little bit of like incremental stuff where you're doing a minute hard, 2 minutes slow, a minute hard, 2 minutes slow, whatever. But what kind of stuff would you guys recommend for players to help build stamina? Maybe, realistically, when you think of stamina, I'm not going to tell a 9-10-year-old to like work on their stamina. I'm going to tell them maybe like not eat as many Timbits from Tim Hortons, but I'm going to say, just keep doing what you're doing, have some fun. For kids that are like that 13, 14, 15, like what would you guys tell them for stamina? Like, being better in long shifts in third period. What do you got?
So one thing for sure, and this is always going to be the first thing, regardless of what sport we're talking about, is being efficient with the movement patterns that you're expressing in that sport. So being an efficient skater, regardless of how fit you are, in terms of maybe you can run 10K and you're like, why am I exhausted on the ice? Well, you're not a very efficient skater. So that's number one, is being efficient. And then learning to control your breath, and like where you're breathing, how you're holding your breath is a big thing. Some people hold their breath while they skate. If they're skating hard, that's going to exhaust you. That's going to jack your heart rate up like crazy if you're not breathing properly throughout. So off the ice, if you wanted to do things like, go on a spin bike or an assault bike or something like that for 10, 15 seconds hard, and then try to control that breath back down to your breathing rate back down to a normal pace. And then once you get good with that, you can start to, something we really like to do is something like so say it's a salt bike and then a bear crawl, if whoever's familiar with bear crawls. So you're going from a high intensity exercise to a low intensity exercise. And during the low intensity exercise, you're trying to control your breathing. So it's a lot like actually being on the ice for a long shift, because there may be a quick 5-second burst, or maybe less even. And then you're 10 seconds, 15 seconds of a lower intensity exercise where while you're still moving, you're controlling your breathing pattern, you're bringing your heart rate back down. And then maybe you're back up onto a treadmill for another 10 seconds. Then you're back into, say, a dead bug or something like that, another simpler movement pattern where you're controlling your breathing. So it's being able to bring yourself up high, but then also consciously bring yourself back down low. I think so many people hold their breath or breathe like very high in their which is way more exhausting than a diaphragmatic breathing pattern when you're trying to relax. So yes, the endurance stuff helps in terms of like biohacks, call it biohacks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Totally.
The breathing is huge, and being able to learn how to bring yourself back down to a baseline heart rate or a baseline respiratory pattern after doing something intense, so that residual effect after intensity doesn't stick with you for too long.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense, man. I like that a lot. That is good.
Yeah, Mitch is the guru on that.
No, it's great, man. No, it's really good. So I hope that answered the question. One other question that came up here, and I'll put it in the notes here, just kind of like I did here, just so people know what we're talking about, is I do everything well in practice and I feel good in training. I'm one of the better players on my team, and sometimes in games I get like stiff legs. Like I feel like I'm heavy. You know what I mean? So on the strength training side of it, or even on the nutrition side, what would you guys recommend players that do that feel like I train my butt off. I feel awesome. But then all of a sudden, like, in games, I feel like my legs are heavy. You know what I mean? I don't feel good about it. We just lost Joshua. That's all right. Keep going.
Yeah. So the nutrition you briefly met, that can be a huge piece. I mean, if training is legitimately in a fantastic spot, and you're still having trouble with that type of thing, I mean, carbohydrates is an obvious one. And there's, well, maybe not. There's a lot of athletes that will even read articles or whatever on, ketogenic diets or something like that. And even some athletes saying that a ketogenic diet is good for marathon runners and hockey players and whoever. But the reality is, I mean, for, let's call it 99% of the population, if you're depleted in carbohydrates, you're going to get heavy, and you're not going to feel good if you're trying to operate your system at a high intensity without the energy stores that you need to do that. And I think a lot of times it is the guys who take training seriously and all that, they're kind of looking up that extra edge, other bit of health advice. And maybe you've read somewhere that you don't need to eat as many carbohydrates and you can operate better and be leaner and all this stuff, because those articles are out there. And I mean, carbohydrates for an athlete are incredibly important. They should be in balance with the amount of activity that you're doing, but yeah, it's really important. Also, isometric work. A lot of people don't put a ton of isometric work into their training, and that can help a lot, like isometric lunge positions, and even going from like an isometric, and Josh loves doing this with the guys, but from like a tough iso into like a jump lunge or something like that.
If you had to like break
that stuff is tough, but what's that?
Sorry, if you had to break down an isometric movement, like, so I'm Johnny, I don't no idea what isometric or concentric or anything.
This is where
there we go. Here we go, boys. We're getting him. I just want to get him out of his seat. Got him out of his seat.
If you're getting down into like a lunge position like this, I've got all my weight over the front leg in this position. Like this back leg is there, but I'm not putting any weight through it. And I'm pressing this front foot into the ground and actively creating tension through quads, hamstrings, glutes. And I'm going to hold that position. What's that?
That was a good slap. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to actively hold that position for, anywhere from 20 to 60 seconds. And then in some cases, maybe even go into something explosive like a lunge jump or something like that after. But isometric work is so important. Slow eccentric work. So when you're lowering a weight or lowering your body, doing that really slowly, anywhere from like 8 to 12 seconds even. That kind of stuff's really important. But the nutrition is also huge. So that's the first thing I would look at if you really feel like your training is spot on.
Yeah, no, that's good. Just real quick though, isometric is kind of like holding that position.
Yeah.
Right?
So isometric means there's the muscle's not lengthening or shortening. Yeah. It's just staying in one spot. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. All right, buddy. Boys, this was great. I don't know if you guys have anything that you guys want to end on, but I think we're gonna do this again next Thursday. Number one, definitely next Thursday, 8 o'clock. We'll do it again. And Josh, you're obviously more than welcome anytime, man. We love your expertise, and I know you've got a young child and a wife who loves you dearly. So we don't want to play way too much. But also one thing too, Mitch, where can people find out more information on what you've got going on and kind of even right now with what's going on? Obviously, we've kind of pivoted a little bit as far as we can train people anywhere. We can work with people virtually anywhere. So where can people find for you and Josh both, but kind of your programs and what you guys have going on?
Josh and I've done a ton of work evolving our online stuff. We were even working on these things before the pandemic and COVID were even a thing. We've actually been working on it a long time. And the last year has been giving us a great opportunity to allow that stuff to evolve. And we're really happy with where we're at in the sense of how we can communicate with athletes virtually. The videos that we have, we've got a massive video database now explaining how to do all these different types of exercises that we use with the players in the training center. TotalPackageSSC.com is where, we display all of our programs on there. We encourage people to fill out our questionnaires, which will shoot us an email. And we can actually have a little bit of a discussion back and forth to figure out what program is best for your needs. And then you can see us on Instagram or Facebook. Total Package SSC is the handle. But yeah, and you mentioned this through the throughout the live too, but reaching out to us over DM on Facebook, Instagram, we'll always respond to that stuff. So feel free anytime.
And really important to remember too, when we go into this, and especially I have a little bit of bias with the speed training, but remember the speed training that we're doing with these guys, don't be intimidated by it. That is the biggest thing. And a lot of these guys, if you look from the student athletes who we train through the school program and all the way up through the pros, some of these pro guys, the first time doing it is when they're 24. And so don't think that it's ever too late to start to master the speed basics, or because this is in my opinion, this is sort of a newer wave in the hockey world, is really understanding the speed, the off ice speed side of it, right? The technical, the importance of proper mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So, if you're 18, you're listening to this and you think you want to be faster, you want to get into a little bit more speed training and you're a hockey player, that's not late. Late is never doing it. So So I think it's really important to get that message across, specifically for speed, but with strength too. Like I didn't touch a weight till I was 19. It's never too late.
Yeah. No, I totally
that's
agree.
great advice. It's true.
Yeah, and don't And I started hockey at 9. I didn't start weight training until I was probably in grade 9 or grade 10. You know what I mean? Like it was, so don't, just when's the best day to start? Like tomorrow, right? or today. Like just do it now. Like let's get it going, man. So if anyone out there has any questions or any comments or anything they'd like to ask or like to find out more about Mitch, Josh, or unbelievable resources, for any on ice stuff, any off ice, components, any strength training, all that kind of stuff is huge. And obviously I'm available for any on ice stuff that you have questions on. And we've got great guys like Kevin and Wade, who was on a couple weeks ago. But we've got some great resources for you. So check us out at, obviously, totalpackageSSC.com or the NSDA.com or totalpackagehockey.ca. We've got a bunch of different stuff on there. If you're local, we have a bunch of programs there that you can check out as well. So we're gonna kick it off there, but thank you very much everybody for checking in, and we will be back again next Thursday. We'll be back.
Great chat. Awesome.
Thanks, Blaiser.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
all right,
see you guys.
Man.